George, welcome to the Personal Best podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
This is the first episode I'm recording in 2025 with a guest. So it's so amazing to have you here. And I feel like this is the perfect podcast for me because I love talking about all things personal development and business. But I also love a sweet treat, particularly cinnamon buns. And so I feel like this is just an ideal conversation. But for people listening, I just want to jump straight in and basically ask you, what inspired you to start Rollboys and how did the journey begin?
I feel like there's two parts to this answer.
Okay.
And I think there's where the idea came from and what actually inspired me.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've ever heard of Cinnabon.
Yeah.
Right? So I tried Cinnabon like years ago.
I don't think they have it in London anymore.
No, there's one in Stratford, right? Which is like a shopping centre. But they haven't got any more around. There's a few in the UK, but I tried that when I was in the US. It was in an airport, and I tried it for the first time, and it was like it was an experience that I've never had, right? And I felt like in that moment there was like a seed planted in my mind, somewhere just in the back of my mind, and I went on with my life. And then years later, fast forward to 2023 or 2022, 2023, I was kind of in this transition period of really not knowing what I was going to do with my life. So came to the point where there's a whole backstory to this, but I mean, just to kind of answer the question, it was the inspiration really was from Cinnabon, and I looked at that brand and I saw them and I was like, this is a cool brand, the concept is great. I looked at it, it was pretty dated, and they're not really innovative with their products. So I felt like there was a space to create something cool and be really innovative with the product. So that's the idea side of it. But what inspired me was, like I said, I went through this transition period in my life where I didn't know what I was going to do. I found myself like starting and stopping so many different things, and like I just couldn't quite get over the hump. I kept coming up against myself, facing the barriers, and then instead of actually going over them, I was running away. And that was a repeat pattern in my life. And then it got to the point of where like my back was against the wall the most. Like I had no money. Like I was actually in the US at the time, and I didn't have enough money for a flight home. And I just had this belief inside that I knew that I wanted to start something on my own. I just went through this whole long process of trying to figure out what that was. And ultimately, I landed on the idea that was planted, the seed that was planted in my head years back, and it came to fruition, it came to the forefront, and I made the decision there and then, like, I'm going to borrow the money to get a flight home and start Rollboys. Like, it literally happened just like that. And then 3 days later, I was in the kitchen and away we went.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's so interesting hearing people's origin stories. And I actually had already seen some of your stuff on Instagram, and obviously loving baking, loving like sweet treats. I thought it looked really interesting, but the actual work that you've put in behind it is so impressive. And I wondered, before you launched it, feel free to go into some of the backstory, but did you always know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur, or did something push you towards that path?
No. I think I always knew that I was creative. I always felt like I didn't deserve to be called an entrepreneur, because I had this idea of an entrepreneur being somebody that's like a CEO, like manages like people and like knows like ins and outs of like shares and numbers and accounts and making business decisions. And I was just like, that's not in, I don't really see that in me. Like, I just felt like I was this guy with a creative mind that I just thought I just wanted to like express that creativity. It's only been recently where it's kind of been brought to my attention, like, you can be a creative entrepreneur, you know, and that means like I'm still able to express my creativity. I don't have to shape myself in a way that I'm not in order to be labeled as something, you know. So that was, yeah, it was kind of like I left my old life behind and kind of started to build my new life, and that's all kind of come in the process of like figuring out myself and my own life, really. So yeah.
I think that's really interesting. It's definitely something I can relate to, like having that sort of creative spark and wanting to do your own thing. And yeah, I guess I've been on my own journey with that. Like, I wrote a blog for quite a few years because that was sort of a creative outlet. I loved writing. I actually did a lot of baking, making like birthday cakes and celebration cakes. Yeah, so I'd take commissions for that. So that was going for a bit. And then now I've created this podcast. And I don't know, I think if you do have that creativity in you, there's something about building something and being able to put your ideas into it that you can't really get from a typical job, you know, unless it's within the creative industry, I suppose. But
I agree, like in terms of like, it's just there's this something driving you inside that just got this desire to create something from nothing.
Yeah, and I think what's tricky about that is when you don't know what the thing is.
100%.
Because it's like, I know I want to do something. I've got these ideas floating around, but like there's nothing concrete that I can sort of put that work into. And then that's why it's interesting to sort of hear how Rollboys came about, that it was just that one moment trying that Cinnabon that sort of sparked something in you. But going off on a slight tangent, I've seen some of your content on Instagram and you've shared a lot about going traveling. And I wondered how that sort of shaped this path that you've gone on. I think there's a bit of a cliche about people going abroad to like find themselves. Did you have that experience?
So it's interesting, actually. I was brought up in a way where none of my family have ever like traveled before. And the first time that I went traveling was when I was 22, and that opened my eyes up to the world. Like, that was something that I'd never experienced before, and I went alone as well.
Where did you go?
I went around the US. So I started on like the West Coast, and I made like a 3-month trip of it. I came back from there, and like the whole narrative was, you've got that out of your system, and now get to work, basically. And I was fortunate enough to be in a position where I actually had my own business beforehand, very different circumstances. But that when I left that, and I mentioned that I was going through a transition period, I actually wasn't supposed to travel. So I actually flew to Mexico, and I was in this, I'd went through a lot of my own personal struggles, and like I'd really started to change my life and start to focus more on my inner self. And I got to the point where I decided to go to Mexico, and I was going for a 2-week trip. And at the end of the 2-week, I was going to come back, do 1 month at my old business, and then officially leave. But when I was in Mexico, the day before I was meant to fly home, I was sat in this beautiful setting, and I just felt like this was where I was supposed to be. And I listened to that, you know, and that is genuinely, I say this, that is like the first time that I ever truly listened to myself. And I made the decision there and then I called my sister, who was my business partner, and I was like, this is what I'm thinking, this is where I feel like I want to be. I'll honour you and respect you. If you need me to come back and finish the year out, I will. If not, then I would love to stay here and go on an adventure. And that's pretty much what I did. She gave me the kind of, because obviously I needed to give the respect to her, so she gave me the blessing to actually stay. And then it was like the journey from there to actually travel without it was a liberating feeling of like the freedom of not having to be anywhere, not having to worry about answering emails and phone calls or any business things. And I don't think it was like this moment where I've really found myself, but I actually genuinely feel like my whole time traveling was a discovery of what I wanted in my life, what I didn't want in my life, and what I was willing to compromise and what I wasn't. And that was a not an easy journey, because there were tests throughout that as well. So yeah, throughout the whole process, like throughout that whole journey, there was lots of lessons and lots of struggles and lots of ups and downs, like anything. But I came back, and I genuinely don't feel like I would have had the space in my system to come up with this, to come up with the idea for Rollboys, if I didn't go through everything that I went through whilst I was traveling. So
Yeah,
you can. There's multiple ways to look at it, but I think that's the way that I kind of see.
yeah, it's really interesting hearing you talk about that, because you're definitely right that there is this narrative that, particularly if you graduate from uni, or even before that, if you take a gap year, you do 6 months of traveling, a year of traveling, and then that's it. And then you follow the traditional career path that you're expected to. But actually, you can go abroad and explore different parts of the world at whatever age and whatever stage of life. But I often do think people do it to sort of run away from their problems. And I don't know if that's always the answer, but actually having the space, as you say, and like the time to really think about what you want to make out of your life, I think that's so valuable, because we actually don't do that very often. We just kind of follow the path that's like
The social norms,
most walked on, and we don't take that time to reflect. So I think it's really important, and I'm not saying that you need to go away and travel for a year to do that, but just ask yourself those questions that you did. You said something earlier that I'd love to bring back about finding these hurdles and sort of not being able to get over them. And I read that you said you were someone that continued to get in his own way over and over again, and then shame himself for feeling like a failure. And I can guarantee that so many people listening relate to that. So what helped you break that cycle and sort of push you to go all in with this business idea?
I feel like you get everything that you are tested with is everything that is put in front of you is exactly how it's supposed to be. And those moments of struggle that I went through, those moments of feeling like a failure, like I was never gonna create something because I kept on stopping or kept on quitting or kept on getting in my own way. That's exactly what was supposed to happen for me. And I truly believed that, because it wasn't the right path. I say it wasn't the right, but it was all part of the path, but it wasn't the right thing for me in that moment. So I think that it was over time, the combined effort to self-grow, the combined effort to persist and keep going, and like I said about compromise earlier, and understand the things that you wasn't willing to compromise in, what I wasn't willing to compromise in my life, and continue to walk that path, knowing that it's uncomfortable, knowing that there's going to be days when you feel like just completely giving up, and there are going to be days where you feel worthless, but you find something within yourself to keep moving forward. And that's what I genuinely felt like on my path, reflecting. That's what happened. And I got to the point where my back was against the wall the most. I didn't know where to turn and what was happening. Yeah. And it came at that moment. And I realized that, and I just Can I swear? And I just fucking ran with it.
Yeah.
I literally just ran with it. I was this feeling, this switch was like, this is it.
I do think there's something to be said for, if you've genuinely got nothing to lose, then you may as well move forward with the idea that you're thinking about. And I love a quote that's like, if you can't stop thinking about it, don't stop working for it. Like, when you have this idea and this desire to do something, like, that's in you for a reason. And I often find that people who are into entrepreneurship and have that creative, like, bug in them, they have all these ideas, but so often don't move forward with any of them, because I think it feels pretty scary to decide to go all in with something.
Why do you think like people don't?
I think it's about the risk to reward, and I think it can feel very risky when you decide to put your time and energy into something and you almost can't see the reward yet. It's definitely how I felt with the podcast. Like, I had the idea for a while, but I was too scared to start it, because you don't know the outcome, and as humans we hate uncertainty, right? But I also think if you don't try, then you'll never know. You'll never know if it'll work out or not. But I know that you've said that you believe it's inside everybody to do something, and you've just got to sort of keep going and follow your heart. But I also know that's quite difficult. So what advice would you give to someone that maybe doesn't have that self-belief yet?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because it is almost like you if you can't see it, or if you don't feel it, then you kind of shut off from the idea of it. In terms of advice, I mean, everybody's on their own journey, right? And not everybody is going to go and end up creating a business or becoming a professional athlete or gymnast or whatever. But it is, and that's okay, because that's not what everybody wants. But I believe that if you keep having this desire, that this feeling inside of you that you want to create something or go for something, create a podcast or job or business, then it is about just believing in the process, you know, and staying true to it. Like, that's all I can say is, like, just believe, like, have faith in the process, trust the process. It's so cliche, but really, like, everything that is happening is for that a reason. Two very cliche things that I just said there.
Yeah, but it's true.
Yeah.
And you know, we've just spoken about what stops people from starting something, and I realized recently that I think one of the biggest things that stops people doing something new is because they're afraid it won't be perfect. And when you have an idea for something, you imagine the flawless execution, you imagine the recognition and the success that you'll get from doing something. Whereas actually, when you do start something and it is new to you, it's not perfect. It is messy, and you will face hurdles that you haven't even imagined yet. And I think it's a hard thing to say to people, but acknowledging that is all part of the process, like you say, makes it a little bit easier, because you're not aiming for perfection then. And that's definitely something that I'm trying to do this year, is realize that not everything has to be perfect, but if I lead with action, then I'm still doing the thing, but it's gonna be messy as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's beauty in the messiness, you know.
Yeah,
like, there's absolute beauty in the messiness, and that is absolutely okay. You have to be shit at something before you're good at it, you know. I mean, like just referring back to cinnamon rolls, who the fuck am I to think that I could start a business making cinnamon rolls, and I've never baked before in my life? You know, the first batch that I made was horrendous. Honestly, it was so bad, right?
yeah,
But I had a belief that this was what I wanted to do. And I went for it. Like, I literally just continue to make them and make them and make them. And now I still pinch myself, like, people are traveling from around the country, from around, like, people are flying in from all over the world, like, to come to London. But like the fact that they're making like this part of their trip a thing is like mind blowing for me. There's this thing that I couldn't do 18 months ago, and now like it's come to life. That process, the messiness, the journey, like, because once we're afraid of the outcome, we're afraid of the reward, but if you go through the messiness and you get to that point of where you're seeing progression and you're seeing people actually appreciate or what you're doing, or you just feel great about it inside, there's no better feeling. Like, it's genuinely, honestly, so wholesome. So it's beauty in the madness.
No, I love that, and I can clearly see how, you know, passionate you are, and it's so true. Like, your first podcast episode will be bad, your first batch of cinnamon buns will be bad, like the first time you go to the gym, your workout will be bad, but you can't get to like elite level of something if you don't take that first step. And so I think that's really important for people to realize. And I'd love to hear a bit more about the details of starting Rollboys, because the fact you couldn't bake, you'd never baked cinnamon buns before, and now that's your whole business. What's the process been like?
A wild ride, like wild. So coming back from the US and never having never had in any baking or experience before in my life, I took to YouTube, you know, and I just knew what I wanted the product to be like. It was just, how do I get it to there? So I kind of reverse engineered without systematically writing it down. It was just like, okay, let's just get to work, like leading with action. And by the way, that's not how I was thinking back then. I wasn't thinking, oh, let's lead with action. It was just doing, you know, I was just in it. And then I came back, got in the kitchen. I just knew like there was the name, everything like aligned. Like the guy that I got to illustrate the logo, like even that was kind of, everything just kind of came and aligned. And I just wanted to start something. So. Because I was in that position where like my back was against the wall, etc. So I put it out there and I started marketing in a way that people didn't know what it was that I was doing.
On like social media.
Social media. The way that I started it was I just started to drip feed and like just started to like tease. It was in the area that I'm from, and then the curiosity started to build, and it was like, what is this that you're doing, you know? And then I dropped it, and then there was like this, oh, that's different, that's cool, like, I've never really seen that before. Like my dad, the first time I told him, he was like, what, you just cinnamon rolls? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, what, nothing else? And I was like, well, yeah. I was like, I'm just going to do different flavours of cinnamon rolls, like bake them fresh, like, and sell them. He was like, all right, you're mad, but go for it, yeah? So 5 weeks after I landed, it was again coming back to that wanting it to be perfect thing. I knew it wasn't perfect. It was good, and I believed in the product that I created. But I took it to market understanding, like, now this time we can continue to develop this, you know. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. It's like you say, the first podcast episode, you're just going to continue to develop and be better. And that's the kind of approach that I took. And then one thing after the other, opened the doors, had an absolute disaster on day one. Oven blew up. Had to turn away all the orders that I had. Literally horrendous. I cried.
No.
Yeah, literally, like, out of frustration, I cried.
Yeah.
And then my mum came down and she was like, this ain't over. Like, we're getting...
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. Like, we're getting back in the kitchen. Like, we're going to fix this, right? So we did. And then the next weekend when I launched the game, I got the feedback from people, and from day one I knew I had something.
Oh, good.
Because it was like, this is great, you know. And you know, when you receive messages and it's good to hear the feedback, the how good they, you know, how people enjoyed them. And yeah, literally just kind of just continued that storytelling, documenting, showing the process, being open, transparent, authentic, like as true as I can.
Yeah.
And as much as I can, show as much as I can, and just focus on getting better at the product, everything, the customer experience, the whole thing. And it kind of just went on and took on its it took on went on its own journey. And yeah, ultimately ended up realizing that what I have here is, with no offense to where I'm from, is bigger than like the small town where I'm from. And I was like, I just had it in my mind. It's like, I gotta go, and if I want to take this as far as I possibly can, I've got to go and really take the steps that really fucking scare me. And that's when the kind of idea to bring it to London came about. So
yeah. So I saw you made the move,
Yeah.
and did you actually move in with your grandma?
Yeah. So I was living in Lee in Essex at the time, and the long story short of all of that is, I lost my pop-up space 4 days before I was meant to reopen in January 2023.
Oh.
With immediate effect. Like, there was like, the woman was so apologetic because it wasn't her fault, but she was like, look, I'm so sorry. And I was left with like, what am I going to do now? The choices were, I find somewhere in Lee, which means I'd have to pay rent. I have to like either find another pop-up space, which was hard to come by, or like find my own space with all the overheads, etc., where I couldn't see Rollboys in the long term, or entertain this opportunity that I had with some people, with a brand from London that was wanting to partner with me to take Rollboys to London. So I opted for that. Right. And I was like, right, I haven't got the money for rent in Essex. So I spoke to my nan. I was like, look, this is what I'm trying to do. How would you feel about me like coming and staying with you? And she opened the door with open arms, you know. So there I went, moved into hers, embedded myself in her life, and started the journey. Which has been like, the journey living there has been one of its own, because she's an 84-year-old Greek woman.
I know she appears in some of
She
your
does,
content.
against her will sometimes. Honestly, she doesn't like it. So I've had to kind of like be like, okay, right, I respect that, like, and maybe I come back at a later date and be like, yeah, can we include you? But yeah, I can't go against the wishes. So yeah, moved in there, saved me so much. It gave me so much mental capacity to just focus fully on Rollboys, you know. And yeah, just to touch on the partnership that I was going into, it was like 3 months into that, and I was like, there was just this burning feeling inside to me that I needed to do this on my own. I had to go ahead with this and further on my own, and it was a very difficult conversation to have. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was right. And then from like March, April time, I just went on my own and just tried to still continue to make it happen. So yeah, that's kind of, there's way more in between it, but
It seems like a common theme though throughout this story is that you're quite good at tapping into your intuition and like listening to your gut. And I feel like everyone is capable of doing that, but it's something that we don't do because it does feel like there's so much external pressure and noise of people telling us what we should be doing. How do you sort of manage that?
I feel like that's built over time.
Yeah.
Because I spent so many years not trusting myself. You know, I spent so many years waiting for somebody else's approval before I'd done something, or could never really make my own decisions fully, because I was too reliant on the perspective, on the thoughts and the ideas of somebody else, giving me the permission to live my own life, you know. So I believe that the first time I ever listened to myself was staying in Mexico. So, and then from that point, it was just that, I think your own journey, like where you're understanding yourself more. I can't explain being like, if there's a natural natural level of listening to your intuition or being in tune with your intuition, but I just feel like it's built. I don't know the why for it, sorry.
Yeah.
Other than like just repetition and commitment to being a better person and getting to know yourself more.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think you start to trust yourself. Yeah, you only do that by doing the repetitions, like you say. But I'm completely aware that running a business takes a lot of resilience, as you say, like that first day when the oven blew up and things being difficult. How do you sort of like get through that now? Do you have any advice for people when things aren't going as planned?
Being prepared that there's always going to be hurdles, that there's always going to be adversity, always. Like, and if you know and are ready for that mentally, that when it happens, it just becomes second nature to like, okay, solution. For example, week 2 or week 3 into the residency, looking back, I think it was my personal error with the baking, the system. I made a mistake with the rolls and the product wasn't coming out good. Right? So we done the first bake and I was looking at them and I was like, I'm not 100% happy with this. Right? And I tried it and we was open, so we was serving, and I was looking at it and I was like, this isn't right. And I made a decision there and then. I was getting so like internal. I was like, this ain't right. This is not right. I can't serve this. So I literally, in that moment, made a decision to just like to pull the plug, right? So I stopped serving and I went and faced the queue of people outside and I told them the situation. And I said to them, look, this is the situation. There's been an issue with the bakes. I didn't know what it was at the time.
Yeah.
But there's been an issue with the bakes, and I hold this brand to a high standard. I hold the product to a high standard. I don't want to give you anything but that. And I went outside and explained this to the people, and then I said to them, look, let me give you tokens, like for when you come back, come and get a free one. I just appreciate you coming out. So the whole point of me saying that is like, there was adversity there. There was that moment where I had a decision, like, could have gone the easy way. I could have gone that route. I could have gone, oh, fuck it, we're gonna lose out. I'm gonna lose out on too much money if I stop selling these and just continue. But it was more than that. It was about more than that. This whole thing is about more than that for me. So I made a decision. I went outside and I told them. It wasn't even. It was natural. It was just like, okay, problem, solution. Made a decision and went and dealt with it. And that's kind of how I've been. But again, you only can get to that by going through it. So that's why the adversity is so fucking beautiful. Like, even though it sucks so hard, like it sucks so bad, like you want to like coil up into a ball and disappear. But it's not until you like sit on the sofa in these moments and talking about it that you realise, fuck, that's exactly what I needed. So
and you build that muscle. Like, obviously nobody wants bad things to happen, but I think when they do, you can sort of prepare yourself for the next thing because you've sort of gone through that before. And it sounds like you handled that situation with, grace and respect, and I'm sure you were freaking out on the inside, but I think it also shows what your motivations are behind this business, and it's not just money, profit. It's like actually creating a brand that means something to you, that other people value and enjoy. And I think that probably helps how you handle these situations as well, is that it matters so much more to you than just, oh,
Bottom
how much
line.
money am I going to make today? And obviously it's been, what, 2 years now since you've been created the brand?
Well, August 2023, I opened.
Okay.
January 24, I lost the pop-up.
Right.
And then the whole of last year, like, if I didn't move into my nan's, then I wouldn't have had no security in terms of I wouldn't have had nowhere to live. Like, I would have had to get a job, like, because of income. Like, she supported me in terms of putting food on the table, and I appreciate not everybody is in that situation.
Yeah.
That's my life situation, and I'm very grateful and fortunate for that. So it allowed me to go all in. So I decided that I was going to commit to Rollboys and commit to try and make it happen. So that's what that's why I moved to London, and we didn't open for the whole of the year, apart from I went back home to do a couple of pop-ups in Leon C for over like one weekend, and then another one over a few weekends, but just for some revenue and like to keep me afloat and to keep the brand alive. So that's what my intention was. That whole of last year was just keeping the brand alive.
Yeah.
You know.
But it's really been a journey of ups and downs.
Yeah.
And I think what you're doing really well is sort of documenting that journey, because so often we see these successful business people, like the CEOs that you were mentioning earlier, with their, you know, £1 million businesses, but you don't actually see like the steps that took them to get there. And I know there's like a quote been floating around about people are jealous of the success but not how you got it. And I think what your content does well is like shows the highs and the lows. And I understand you are in a privileged position to be able to live with a family member, but that also took a lot of sacrifice. And there's also people who are sitting on a trust fund that then allows them to start a business. So everyone's starting from completely different points. And I just love the transparency that you put out with that journey.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
I wonder how you see sort of the entrepreneurial landscape as a whole, because I don't know if it's just this echo chamber that I'm in, but it feels like a lot of younger people, particularly Gen Z, are wanting to sort of do their own thing and follow that entrepreneurial path. Is that something that you've noticed as well, or am I just in a particular part of Instagram?
I feel like there's more of a acceptance on doing your own thing in life than there used to be. And I think that is absolutely okay. Now, the issue is with entitlement. If young people feel entitled that their life is going to be handed to them, that's where I feel like there's blurred lines. Because yes, follow your heart, go for it, but understand what it takes to get there. It's never going to be handed to you. And I feel like there's this generation which could feel too entitled and too comfortable that it's just going to be handed to them on a plate, which will catch up with you in the end, you know, if that's what you're chasing. Because it's really when you understand like what's driving you and why, like what is the why behind what you're doing, you know, then you'll be able to take those, I mean, create something of your own, for example. You know, you get into this position where you might not realize, like, as a youngster, like what it, if nobody's ever told you, like, this is of nobody's ever guided you in a way of kind of saying, understanding, like, this is what it takes to kind of build your own business, follow your heart, do that. then it is easy in this day and age to kind of expect that you're going to be an influencer or a YouTuber or something that, but it's like, I feel like there's a little bit of a blurred lines with maybe the guidance of youngsters in this generation. So
I completely agree.
yeah.
And it feels like there's a very fine line between having self-belief and, you know, that creative spirit that we've spoken about, and then, as you say, this sort of self-righteousness, this entitlement of, oh, well, I'm just going to do what I want. And we are given so many options now compared to our parents' generation and our grandparents, where the career path was a lot more straightforward. It's still there to a certain extent, but I think anybody can sort of make a career for themselves through social media now, which is absolutely wild. And as you were just speaking there, I think the correct motivation, I suppose, is to sort of do your own thing, but make it something outside of yourself, like something that serves others, if that makes sense. Because yeah, you then are self-motivated, but the drive isn't just, oh, I want all the recognition and success that comes with that. Is actually like, how am I helping other people? And I suppose that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast, in encouraging people to better themselves. And it's also what you're doing in giving people an experience and creating a community around like a really strong brand.
Yes.
Yeah.
And no, I absolutely, and I'm with you there. And then just to kind of not to pivot on that, on the point about the younger generation, but just specifically something that came to me when you were saying that is like, there comes this moment where like I'm like, shit, I am doing this. Yes, it is great, and I'm doing it for like, as much as I am doing it for like creating something outside of myself. Like, there is this fine like back and forward that I find myself in sometimes. Like, is this just like, is it just for me, or is like, am I actually like, you know, it's kind of understanding that, where that's coming from, and knowing the motivation behind it. Because yeah, like it all comes back to the moment of realizing, okay, yeah, so this is a business that I've built. It is a business that I am supplying a experience, whether it would be online or in store for others, and trying to supply value through that as well. And sometimes my ego is on my shoulder going, you know, like, you know, like, yeah. So, yeah, I just felt like there's a funny dynamic to kind of witness in that moment. He was telling me that, so, yeah.
And you're dealing with that on a personal level all the time. I completely understand. But what's next for the future of Rollboys? Where do you see the brand going? How do you see yourself evolving?
So, I started this with every intention to take it as far as I possibly can. You know, I said that from the beginning. There's no limitations to where it can go. I wanted to take it as far as I can, but I wanted to lead from the heart. And I wanted it to come from a place of authenticity and realness, you know. I read a book from the founder of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, because I was in this place of where, like, how can you create a big business if it's not corporate and all of this? And I read that book, and he spoke about his journey of how he started Starbucks, how he structured Starbucks in the way. This is years back, so now to what it is now, it's a very different story. But it began from this place of where he really continued to try and build from his values, from the heart. And I read that and I was like, all right, so it is possible. You know, it might be against the status quo or against the standard CEO's idea of a business, but it's possible, you know. And that was kind of gave me this inspiration as to like, right, let's do this. So to answer your question, I really see it growing into a space where we're a highly recognized brand, but for the right reasons, you know, whether we have 10 stores, 500 stores, or 1,000 stores, which there's no limit, because I'm open to it all. It just has to be from the right place, you know, from every single area, from every single avenue. And that's what sits right with me. That's why I make a decision to not serve subpar roles. That's why I decide to not go with a partnership that really would have been the easy path. Everything would have been handled. The heart and soul is what's most important to me. And creating something that people feel a part of. People want to connect to something and somebody. And I think if I continue, this is just segueing onto where I see myself, if I continue to be that the founder-led, the face of the brand, founder-led brand, and take that role on, I believe that's where I'll thrive because of my creativity. There's a brand called Nude Project. It's a clothing brand. Young founders, a guy called Bruno Casanovas, inspires me so much, like, to what he's built. He has led the brand from being the creative director and is the face of the brand, and he storytells, and he is exactly somebody that I look at and I go, this is the role for me, you know? So developing the brand and really driving the brand forward from the front. Yeah. But making sure that the structure and the foundation is laid now, you know? So that as we grow and expand, everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet in terms of this is the Rollboys way. Yeah. And that is what I'm committed to creating.
I think that's a really important lesson to lead from the heart, because I imagine when you're starting a business, it's so easy to get lost in like the numbers and the money and the, you know, business strategy. But actually, if you go with what feels right and honest, I think you can't really go too far wrong. And I definitely agree with like putting yourself at the heart of your business. And it's the same with, I forget her name, but the founder of Odd Muse, which is a new clothing brand.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And everyone will recognize her as the founder, and she shares so much online and is very vulnerable. And I think it just humanizes the brand now. We're living in a world where people, even though we're online, really want to connect with people. And so I think that's super important as well. I feel like I could go on a different tangent, but I'm going to round this up and ask the question I ask everybody, which is, if you had to share one piece of advice or a quote or something to help people achieve their personal best, what would it be?
Commit to yourself and don't give up on yourself, you know, because ultimately, like, this is your life and your path. By committing to yourself, I mean listen to yourself. Commit to becoming a better person, a better human being, and walk that path, you know? It's not going to please everybody else, you know? You might seem different to other people, but if you commit to yourself and you don't give up on yourself, then that is just a recipe for success in whatever way you want to look at it. So I think that's yeah.
I love that. And I think with you sharing a bit of your story and your journey today, that's clearly something that you do live by. And that's definitely something that I need to hear, and probably a lot of people listening do as well, because it's so easy to doubt ourselves and get hung up on our failures and feel like we're not good enough. But actually, you have it within your control to sort of do what you want to do and build a life that is really meaningful to you as well. Last question, what's your favorite flavor?
Oh, you know what, I get asked that so often, so often, and I still take a minute to answer. I think I have to say what's my favourite flavour right now.
Right now.
It is, in first place, is the caramel apple crumble.
Oh my gosh.
It is delightful.
That sounds amazing.
It's divine. Yeah, I love the pieces of apple inside with the raisins and like a caramel frosting with a homemade crumble on top.
I'm hungry.
It is, yeah.
And if people want to come down and try, if anyone's listening and they're in London, where can they go
Yeah, sure,
at the
that's
minute?
a good point. So we're currently in residency with a coffee shop called Saint Espresso.
Yeah.
They have got multiple sites. So when you Google Maps it, make sure you choose the Hackney store.
Okay.
So it's Saint Espresso Hackney Wick to be precise. And we're there Saturdays and Sundays from 10 a.m. until sellout. Frequently asked question, when do we sell out? Any time between 1 and 2 p.m. I say 1 and 3 p.m, but it's usually between 1 and 2 p.m.
And you normally sell out?
We usually sell out.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I had our record weekend just gone, which is great. So,
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, it's just building on from there. So, yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything you have today. I honestly think people are going to leave feeling inspired and motivated and encouraged to go out and do the thing, which is what I'm always trying to encourage people to do. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And wishing you all the best for the new year and beyond.
Yeah, appreciate you.
And thank you everybody for listening.